Yes, the college football playoff committee stole the ending from this story, but it's time to reflect on what was an amazing season, an amazing, full stop, 13-0 season alongside Ira Schoffel, the managing editor of Warchant.com. My name is Tom Lang, and right now on the site, Warchant.com, Ira wrote about the 10 most pleasant surprises of this 2023 season. There were so many to choose from. There's more than 10, Ira, but Florida State had a lot of storylines, and you noted it, that many of these surprises came from within the program, not, recent transfers, but a lot of guys who have been playing in Tallahassee at Florida State for a long, long time.
Yeah, I think if I'm Mike Norvell or the recruiting staff, this is the kind of thing that I think that they're going to want to point out to recruits and transfer portal prospects, because there are some Keon Coleman's who was pretty well made when he got to Florida State, and maybe a Jared Verse. But a lot of these guys that were stars on this team or just key players on this team were guys who really did develop over the course of their career at Florida State. And a lot of them really took big jumps this year. I think when you go into a season, and you're trying to figure out wins and losses and how positions are going to stack up. You always kind of ask, okay, if this guy takes a step, that's big. Or if this position group gets strong play out of these two guys, and it's almost like, they kind of got all of that to happen, right? There's not really any area where you went into the season. Maybe the offensive line's not what people were hoping it was going to be, but pretty much everywhere else, I think that they pretty much exceeded expectations.
And we'll get to the offensive line in just a second. But when you're talking about we need this guy to take a step, a big step, the number one player that comes to mind for me is Jerrion Jones. Mm-hmm. And Ira, before the season started, we're talking fall camp. It looked like Greedy Vance had the nickel job locked down. He was the one that was participating the most often, but it looked like at the end of the last season through spring camp, Greedy had just kind of locked that position down. That's where he was going to be. You could almost set it and forget it. While there might be shuffling elsewhere in the secondary, it was Greedy's job. And then the two deep came out, and Jerrion Jones was listed above Greedy Vance. And personally, I'm thinking that's a surprise. But then, Ira, by the end of the year, you see some of the Pro Football Focus grades, but Jerrion Jones was a playmaker for Florida State this season through and through.
Yeah, I think they kind of found that. I think if you go back to last season, he played well. I thought he played pretty well as an outside cornerback, and he was in that rotation, started some games, and probably I think some people might have thought, was going to be still challenging maybe Fentrell Cypress for a starting cornerback job. And then there was talk that maybe he'd get some work at safety in the spring and see how that looked. And then they also worked him at slot corner, and I think he really just took off there. I think this is the healthiest he's ever been. I think he was in a great frame of mind. And I think he's really well suited for that position. And they did some things scheme wise to help him out as well. It's not like he was, Tyrann Mathieu out there, but he played really well, did what they asked him to do, and really blossomed. I think his PFF grades are kind of off the charts. He had a bunch of big turnovers. The play, he led the team with 3 interceptions, but the play of the year was probably the strip sack. For the play of the year for him, one of the plays of the year for the team was his strip sack and fumble recovery against North Alabama, which you'd say, oh, come on, it was North Alabama. But, man, that game was dicey. And Jordan Travis had just gone down with his injury, and there was a pall over the stadium. And that play kind of, breathed new life into that team that day.
Yeah, and if you don't like Pro Football Focus grades as a reference point out there, well, if you take a look at Florida State's 2 rivalry games down the stretch against Miami and Florida, and guys named Restrepo and Pearsall, right. Those are slot guys largely, and the lack of production that from both of those rivals. I think Restrepo might have had 1 catch. It was late in the game, maybe 2. Pearsall had the 1 catch, I know for sure, and I think it was about like 12 yards. Jerrion Jones was something else. And then Ira, to the offensive line, which, yes, against preseason expectations, didn't live up. But this is almost, for me, a personal top 40 confession for the Warchant top 40, because I had Jeremiah Byers as being the Swiss Army knife. I thought that's what he was going to be. Where would this offensive line have been in 2023 without Darius Washington, Ira?
Yeah, it's hard to even imagine. And we knew Darius would be valuable because he does have that versatility. Also, he could play center. He could play any spot on the offensive line. But you always felt like when a guy's praised for his versatility that, yeah, he can do it. He can function in that position and, give you an honest day's effort, but he's not going to be a standout. He's not going to play. He's not going to be a plus player. And I think for most of Darius's first 3 or 4 years at Florida State, I think that was pretty true. But this year, if you go back and look at it, I mean, when he went to tackle, he might have been their best tackle. And when he was at center, he was their second best center. And if they played him at guard, I think he might have contended to be their best guard. I mean, he just is a different looking guy. He's bigger and stronger. He's really kind of gained that man weight. You know, when he got forced into action 4 years ago, he was a skinny kid. Then he had shoulder problems, but man, he just really emerged. I mean, he ended up being first team All ACC. Again, I don't know how many people would have predicted that before the season.
For the full list, you can head to warchant.com. There's 10 names. I want to talk about a name that doesn't appear, Ira, if you don't mind, if you'll indulge me. Akeem Dent was somebody that in the preseason, I think Florida State was looking around to see if they could have somebody usurp him, be it a Kevin Noles, who looked really good in fall camp, then obviously struggled during the season. Young players like a Conrad Hussey in the mix there as well. I remember Adam Fuller talked about maybe cross-training a couple of players. You mentioned Jerrion Jones, but, you know, in order to fortify that rank with Shyheim Brown. And then when Akeem Dent was not on the field, Ira, it was apparent. By the time he came back, it was the middle part of the season, second half of the season. He's fully healthy. And it's just everybody looked a hell of a lot calmer out there. I think Akeem Dent, for me personally, maybe because I didn't expect enough out of him, was a tremendous surprise and a pleasant one.
Yeah, I could definitely make the case that he should have been on there. And he was, you know, as I did this list, I basically started off with, I pulled probably about 18 pretty obvious choices, 17 or 18 obvious choices, which again speaks to why this team was so good and exceeded a lot of people's expectations, because there were a lot of players that played by far their best season, and probably better than we could have expected. And Akeem at the end, I ended up leaving him off. I was kind of torn between, Azaria Thomas was one I was toying with him, and Azaria Thomas is a guy who is a true sophomore to get into that top rotation at cornerback. I didn't think there was much of a drop off. There were a couple games where he wasn't his best, but overall, especially late in the year, I thought he was as good as anybody they have at corner. And they had two good corners, Renardo Green and Fentrell Cypress. I don't think they missed a beat when he was in there. And for a true sophomore, I thought that was really impressive. So I gave him the nod. There was maybe one or two other guys kind of in that mix. I wanted to go with one freshman. I wanted to single out Conrad Hussey just because they brought in a really good freshman class of DBs, and that group is going to be very they're going to play a big role in this team going forward. There weren't always a ton of opportunities for those guys because they had a very good secondary, but there's a lot of, I mean, you can speak to it as well. They have a lot of really talented freshman DBs, and but for Hussey to earn as much playing time as he did, there were some growing pains, man. There were some tough moments, and he took some L's out there at different times in the season. But he also, man, competed, made a bunch of big plays, created turnovers, is not afraid to stick his nose in there. I just was really impressed for a true freshman, because I also think back to what kind of gave me an edge for him again was Shyheim Brown was one of the stars of the first spring and preseason when he got here, remember? But we loved him. We loved what he looked like physically. And he made a lot of plays in practice, but he never really could get on the field. And Adam Fuller would talk about how difficult it is to play safety as a true freshman. So for Conrad Hussey to earn that trust and to get out there and not ever shrink when he had bad moments, to me, I thought he really exceeded what I think is normal to expect for a true freshman.
Yeah, considering that he runs hot, right. That's the way he plays. There are some players that are even keel, and that's how they're at their best. And then there are some dudes who wear their heart on their sleeve. And so for Conrad to be able to handle some low moments because he wears his heart in his sleeve and then focus, make big plays as he did. Yeah, I mean, he's going to be in that rotation next year for sure. Somebody to watch in the spring. Folks, as Ira's going through some of these storylines, and you can read them all on warchant.com, it just makes you a little bit more angry that they don't have a chance to go finish the job. But it's not these players' fault. So celebrate all of the positive storylines. Reflect on what was an extremely successful season. It's not the players' fault that they don't get a chance to go play for the title. They had excellent years. A full list of them right now on warchant.com. Stay tuned to Warchant TV for the latest on Florida State team preparations for the Orange Bowl, as well as signing day coming up on Wednesday, December the 20th.